Yeah, so I want to thank everyone for their time here today. As I said, we're going to be building sort of a serverless application here. And what you're seeing here is sort of a cheeky title, putting the world back in a hello world with MongoDB Atlas on Google Cloud Platform. So cheeky is, that doesn't quite make sense. What does that mean? So obviously, we're going to be doing a hello world application of a pairing with MongoDB Atlas as a backend with the Google Cloud product. And putting the world back in, it's actually going to be a low latency hello world. It's actually the best I've seen. Clearly, I'm biased. I made it. But basically, based on our use case here, we're going to be spinning up multiple nodes across the world. So when we do our hello world, we're really going to have a low latency application that we're going to try to build within 45 minutes live. So when I say we, that's primarily going to be me. But there's a caveat at the end here. But this is going to be a live demo, right? So live demos are fun. We do have Murphy's Law. I will try my best to make sure this goes smoothly. But with that said, let's sort of jump in here. So I know I got a quick introduction there, in terms of who am I, this guy on stage. Ken Smith with Google Cloud, based out of New York, customer engineer. I work with some of the largest enterprise companies out there in terms of their transition path for wherever they may be. That could be on-prem, other cloud providers, hybrid, to their sort of cloud journey and help them sort of bridge these gaps. So I've been with Google for a little bit over 3 years now, going on 4 years. I've been inside the cloud industry as an engineer for the last 7 to 8 years. And prior to that, I've been in infrastructure for roughly the last 8 to 11 years or so. So that's a little bit about me and sort of my credentials here. So as you guys probably imagine, at a MongoDB Atlas, once again, the story is going to be about Google Cloud and MongoDB Atlas and sort of our use case, which sort of takes us into this. So what is our use case here? Okay, so let's say that we work at the same company here. It's a large enterprise company. And we're being tasked to develop a global web-based application with the majority of our users in the US and a slightly smaller percentage of our users in the UK and Australia. Now, if we were to pause right there, I can tell you that that's somewhat concerning as a cloud engineer, right? Because once you start dealing with an application serving on a global basis, that immediately sort of gives me chills on the back of my neck in terms of latency concerns. It sort of opens you up. So if we move on to the rest of our use case here, we need to have something with native scaling capabilities. Great. So we're not doing lift and shift. We're not moving an existing one. That's actually great to hear from me. It's going to pay dividends down the road here. That's going to allow us to spend less of time managing infrastructure, more time adding new features and capabilities. You heard that sort of touched on briefly during the keynote, but that really is very important because when we say native scaling capabilities, we don't want to be managing servers on a one-by-one basis, adding servers as demand spikes up, if you even can do it quick enough. Maybe load balancers and whatnot, but even those need to be configured. And then also needs to sort of scale down when we don't really need the application that much. You shouldn't really have the cost, you don't really need it. And it should really do that on its own. That time savings we have, let's say it's easily sort of double-digit percentages, is going to allow us to go ahead and make better use of our 40-hour work week. And hopefully our work week is 40 hours. And that means that's less time getting ahead of your competition, more job security, so on and so forth. Moving on here, we have a requirement for a document store database here for our backend. So you're hearing not relational. Multi-region support, once again, probably because of the first bullet point there in terms of where our users are located. And data security is key because of the time in which we live in terms of security breaches and whatnot. Just specifically calling out here, the wide user base latency, yep, we got it, already identified. And lastly here is that the direction given to us and our team here by our CTO is he needs a proof of concept before he signs off and commits architecture hours, OpEx, towards a certain suggested architecture, which makes sense. So this demo is as if we're sort of doing a POC, sort of proving what is possible here, right, in terms of meeting our needs and our use case. So you guys are sitting in a MongoDB conference, big surprise for the document store, we're choosing MongoDB Atlas. Probably caught no one off guard here, but there are some key things to sort of call out here about why we're sort of choosing this. So just real briefly here, end-to-end encryption, TLS, SLL, always-on authentication, dedicated clusters, role-based IAM. They can also do multi-region clusters, which we're going to sort of see here in a moment. But that's going to be very important because of this wide user base that we called out here inside of our use case. Now, if we actually, our application is very successful, which I hope so, there's an opportunity to go ahead and scale this up in Atlas without bringing downtime using something like sharding and high throughput for M30s and ups, which once again I think was called out during the keynote here. And then, of course, if we just wanted to play with sort of a POC, slightly different use case here, which I'll tell you why in a moment, but we did just announce our free tier MongoDB Atlas on Google Cloud Platform. So that's great, but that's just a database. What are we going to actually use for our front end here? Google Cloud Google Cloud Platform has roughly 70, 80 plus products and growing, and App Engine is sort of one of these natural fits. This is one of our first products we actually brought to market. It's probably one of our most mature. It's part of our platform as a service. It's part of our serverless offerings here. What's really great about this is that it actually will scale up and scale down by itself. We will have to go ahead and call out where our primary region is, but it will take advantage of Google's network and do edge caching globally for you. You do not need to configure that. It will scale up and scale down in real time as needed without you having to focus on it. So I'm not going to go through the bullet points here, but I will call out that App Engine Flexible, which is actually what we're going to be using here, allows us to use a third-party database like MongoDB Atlas. So in terms of basic building blocks, I think we're going to choose MongoDB Atlas and App Engine Flexible environment to get going here. So I'm going to try to keep the slides here. At least I made a conscious effort to do the bare minimum. I'm not trying to bore anyone to sleep here. The majority of our time is going to be spent actually spinning up a demo here. Okay. So what are we going to be doing in the demo? I gave you a brief setup here. Hello World application. We're going to be using Node.js here with App Engine Flexible. And at a super high level, the steps we're going to be doing is creating, configuring MongoDB Atlas, multi-region cluster in GCP. We're then going to configure a Google Cloud Platform account for the App Engine Flexible environment to go ahead and accept the API calls we're going to be making here. We're going to configure a Node.js application and spin up a Debian VM inside of GCE. And we're going to push our application to App Engine using those APIs. And then from there, that application will be spun up. It will be live. Any sort of web-enabled terminal will be able to access this. Once again, it's going to have the low latency given how we're going to build this out. So with that said, let's just jump right into the demo and see how we're actually going to piece this together. So I don't know how many of you guys in the audience have already sort of played around with MongoDB Atlas. I think they came close, Andrew Davidson did in the keynote of showing you this. But what we're going to try to do here quickly is act as if we're building this out from scratch here. So once again, pretty ambitious here. This is all live. Even though we do have a little bit of code in a text editor, copy and paste, once again, for the sake of time, trying to prevent sort of fat fingering this. So please excuse me if I'm not very mobile here, but I'm kind of going to have to work at the keyboard here. So if you haven't already signed up, please sign up for MongoDB Atlas here. When you first sign in, you're going to see something like this. If you notice here, it says we do not have any clusters, right? Makes sense. We just started. We're going to build something out here. We're going to use Google Cloud Platform. Once again, these are the 3 regions where free tier is available. But the free tier is for an M0, which is sort of a shared cluster. We will not be using that because actually to use the clusters called multiple regions, as you see here, we need to do M10 and up. So we are going to have to pay for this, given the fact that this is sort of a wide install base, but it also will be a dedicated cluster for us. So we're going to skip the free tier on this route, and we're going to go all in, and we're going to configure this M0 here straight to an M10. So yep, shared M0 free, yeah. Dedicated development cluster M10. Yep, this is the bare minimum we need to get going. So if we go up here about do we want to configure this on multiple regions, the answer is, of course, yes. If we go down here, and you notice here our default is in the US, which matches up with our use case with the primary of our users here, which is great. 3 nodes here for sort of redundancy and backup within the US. okay? But for the other regions, we're just going to add a read replica. Once again, based on our use case, that's going to be one in the UK, actually you're going to see London, and then one in Australia, just so those guys can have pretty quick reads. So here is Sydney, one node. I'm going to try to keep this cost effective. And then we're going to go ahead and do London. Now, clearly, I can go ahead and add more if I wanted to, but I think just to prove a point, I think that's pretty good. So yep, this looks good. We have our M10. We'll take these defaults here. This all looks good to me. Cluster name, we're going to keep cluster 0. Sounds good. Create cluster. So this cluster is being created now in the back end. It says, please wait, it's being created here. It's going to take roughly 7 to 10 minutes. It's going to be 5 nodes. So it's actually making calls for you in the back end of our different GCP regions in these different areas, and actually spinning up the infrastructure, pushing out the code, and making it as if it's one large cluster. So MongoDB Atlas is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us. But while we're waiting for this, and it gives you a little status update of what it's doing up here, we're going to go ahead and start configuring our security. So we're going to go down to security here, and we need to add a user. Go down here, add a user. It's going to be admin. We're going to give it a password. Make sure you write that down. And we're going to select Atlas admin. We need full rights here, just what we're doing to make sure we don't have any issues. Add users, and just like that, we have an admin user here that can connect to our database. By default, no one can connect to your MongoDB Atlas cluster without explicitly allowing IP addresses, which makes sense. So this is secure by default. I'm going to say add IP address. Now, ideally, you want to enter sort of a CIDR block for like your work address of where you might be trying to access this. If you're a small developer, this might be something like your personal terminal. There's actually a little handy box here that says your current IP address. Purpose of our demo was just going to allow from anywhere. I mean, obviously, this is a security risk, but this is just to make sure we don't have any issues now. We'll sort of stack the cards in our favor. Great. So from there, we've added our user, we've added our IP whitelist here. And the reality is, though, is that for the sake of the 40 or 45 minutes we have here, we're actually not going to wait for this to spin up because it would probably take too long. But I will show you what the end result looks like over here. So we're going to do a little bit of a cooking show trick and say that once our cake is done baking, this is similar to what you're going to see here. As you notice here, there are three nodes here inside of the US as we selected, and our 2 read regions here, 2 read replicas inside of London and then Sydney here. It looks like they're just sort of humming along here. Now, the end goal, once we sort of create a new database here, is that we want to go ahead and get a connection string. This connection string is what we're going to put in our application in a moment that goes and says where our sort of database is, what is the user's credentials that we're actually going to use to connect to it. So I selected the connect button. I'm going to say connect to my application. Great. I'm using 3.4 and earlier. And we're just going to copy and paste this. And notice that this is actually where you stick your password here. That's highlighted password here. Then it goes on and tell you how to use this, right? But for our purposes, we already have this copied down. And our connection string is right here. So from that point, our database is live, it has a user, it knows where to accept connections from, and is ready to be written to and start serving and returning requests, right? On a global basis with low latency. But we still don't have that front end yet. So that said, we're going to hop inside of Google Cloud, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to configure our Google Cloud account for App Engine. So if you haven't signed up for Google Cloud, it's cloud.google.com. You can try it free here for $300 credit, or you can sign in on the top right if you already have an account. So once you get into your account here, Dependence New is going to look slightly different, but this is sort of the main sort of URL here. So I'm kind of already in the account that we want to use to start spinning things up, but just for demonstration purposes, If you want to know how to sort of create a new project, you just select our drop-down, new project, and we can pretty much spin this up from scratch here. So let's call this Atlas Google Demo 2018. Note here that the project ID can't be changed. So if you want to, after the fact, if you want to change it, you can change it now. This will be part of the URL that makes sense in a moment. If I hit create, you'll see this little icon here sort of spin to say it's doing something, and it says it's creating this project. So this project would only take roughly 10 seconds or so to sort of create. We'll give it a moment. And then once this is ready, we'll be able to select it over here on the left side, sort of drop down here. So right now we're in Demo Atlas App Engine 2, which is actually where we want to be. So you notice it's just completed, which pretty much took no time. So just to switch between projects here, I can choose the drop down here and to create this Atlas Google demo. As you see, it's just changed, and there's a whole different level of resources. So this is how we do sort of isolation here between projects and resources and clients by default, is that we use different sort of projects. So we actually don't care about this one, so we will just leave him alone just to show us how we spin things up. And now we're back to the main page. Great. So now let's go ahead and enable a couple of APIs. So once we spin up our instance here, it would be ready. Or how about we do that inversely? Let's go ahead and spin up our Debian instance now we're going to use. So I went on the left side menu, chose compute VM instances. Yep. It looks like this is getting ready, so we'll give it a moment here. So this is enabling Compute Engine on this project, and this is sort of new for us. That's ready. We're going to try to duplicate this and go to enable our APIs here. So we're going to go on the left side here and go down to APIs and services, dashboards. As you notice, there's nothing here that says App Engine or App Engine Flexible or admin. So we're going to enable those, and once there are, they should show up here. So this tells me all the APIs we have here. So since I know what I'm looking for, App Engine Flexible, yep, this is what we want here. Looks good. We're going to enable this API since we needed to be able to talk to this project for our code. It's going to go ahead and do that. In the back end, I'm also going to go ahead and do our second one just to speed things up here. If you also want to go ahead and look for APIs to API Explorer, you could also just type in what you're looking for at the top box, API Explorer. Yep. Great, and now we're going to choose our admin one. Super. Yep, and let's enable this too. Great, so these two guys are enabling for our project. We'll let them just go ahead and cook here. This says it's still getting Compute Engine ready. We'll just refresh this guy. Great. So now I've enabled Compute Engine for this project here, and now we can get started with spinning up our actual sort of Debian instance. Yep, we'll keep instance 1's a name, that's fine. We'll keep US East 1 for our region. We can definitely do this in one core, not an issue, but we want to make sure that this is kind of fast, so I'm kind of greedy. I'm just going to choose 8 cores here so we can move along. But we're also going to allow the Compute Engine default service account to have access to all cloud APIs. So the 2 APIs we just enabled, I'm going to make sure that it's not going to have an issue talking with those because by default we do not enable all APIs. And this is Debian 9. Looks good to me. And let's go ahead and spin this up here. So you notice that once we click spinning up our instance here, see it's creating. We actually spin up Linux instances really, really fast. This is a core box. I think it might be roughly somewhere in the order of 10 to 30 seconds. So in a moment, as you see, it's done already creating. So that is live, it is up, it is ready sort of to take requests, which is awesome. So before we click on that SSH, we're just going to make sure that our APIs are enabled. Yep, this one says disable for App Engine Flexible, which means it's good. And this one's the same. Good. So we have our APIs, we have our instance. So to make it easy, all we're going to do is click the SSH button, and the Pantheon platform in Google Cloud will automatically handle exchanging the keys. And we'll be SSH into our Debian instance, and then we can move on to the scripting. So we configured our cluster, and MongoDB is ready to accept connections. We have configured our Google Cloud account from scratch, enabling 2 APIs pretty quickly here. Now we're on to actually writing our code, and we're in. Great. So let's see here. So as I said before, just to make sure things go smoothly here, we're just going to copy and paste here some of the updates we're going to do here. So let's go ahead and update this instance for the requirements we need so to get this moving here. So we're just going to do a sudo app update here on this. Once again, pasting, not to fat finger it. It's working. It's done. From here, we're going to go ahead and do a few more configuration steps. Great. And then we're going to go ahead and make sure that we can do our build essentials in Node.js here. And we need our JavaScript package manager, npm install inconf. Once this is finished, super. Yep, not too worried about the warnings. I think we're okay. And let's go ahead and initialize npm. Great. So let's give this package a name. We're going to name it test. Take this versioning, 1.0.0. Description, we're going to leave it blank. Entry point, we're going to say change to server.js. No, I said I wasn't going to fat finger this, but I guess I like pushing my luck. And we'll just take the rest of the defaults through here. We got what we needed. Yep, this is okay. Okay, that's part done. Great. Now we're using MongoDB 2.2.33. Just going to go ahead and pass it along. It's installed. Super. Now we're going to go ahead and write this server.js file inside of our text editor Nano. Super. So let's see. So this is the code we're actually going to use for our server.js here. At a high level, we're actually going to connect to a MongoDB Atlas cluster here using our connection string. So we can go back in the MongoDB. We did copy that over. You'll see in a moment here. We'll paste that in here. And then if you go down here, once it makes that sort of connection, we're going to go ahead and open up a database collection called messages. From there, we're going to tell the application to write hello world plus a time date stamp, and then pass it along to MongoDB and then serve it back in the loop. So at a high level, that's what this code is doing. At the end of the demo, you guys will have an opportunity to look at this for yourself. But for the sake of brevity, we're going to sort of keep this moving here. So since we didn't quite wait for the first one to finish here, we're just going to switch over to one that's already up. This is a connection string we copied over with my password, so just keep that between me and you for now. But all seriousness, this will be blown away very shortly here. There's no other way really to sort of do this here. So what we were going to end up doing is that we're going to take our connection string, which is here. This is what you get. I think we already showed this. Once you hit connect, we'll copy this. And then it's going to say put in your password here, password's in. we're going to grab this whole block here. We're going to paste it between the lines that say paste password here, which should be here. So we know this is good, our code, our connection string, our password. I'm going to copy this, great. I'm going to move over here to our server.js file. I'm going to paste that in. Just going to go up just to make sure that it looks happy. Yep, looks good to me. We're going to go ahead and exit and save out here. Yep, save. Yep, server.js. Looks good to me. Super. So now this is written. From here, let's see if we can go ahead and start this and possibly see if we can spin this up on our Debian instance locally just to make sure it works before we try to push this to App Engine. All right, well, that looks like a good sign. As you see here, it says started web process. Okay. From here, we're going to go ahead and say, all right, let's take a look at this guy. And if we're successful, we need to open up an instance. If we're successful, we should see return hello world here, but it's just going to be locally for now. We'll have to do a little bit more configuration here. So let's open up a second SSH window. Once again, it's handling these credentials to SSH in the back end. It makes it a lot easier for us. It knows who we are since we're logged into the console. Super. I think I didn't copy something over. Yep. Missing a C here. Hey, hello world. Okay, so this is a good place to be right now. Basically, it means that our hello world application is at least working on the server itself. So since this is a web application, this is essentially just an HTTP server that is doing what it's asked to do right now. But we're going to have to go ahead and then push this to App Engine. And we've already started on that configuration here. So to do App Engine flexible, we're going to go inside text editor. We're going to create an app.yaml file and then tell it the application languages and what do we need it to do here. And now I'm thinking about it. We didn't actually enable App Engine, which is great because we caught it before we ran into it. So let's go back over here. Inside a Google Cloud Platform, App Engine, your very first app. Great. So we're going to select a language. We're using Node.js. So it will serve this globally, but basically it's saying where are the primary of your users in terms of where it's going to try to concentrate the servers here. So based on our use case, that's in the US. US Central looks good to me. Billing's already taken care of. And it's basically going to spin up the App Engine services, so it's going to be responsive when we try to push our code to it. So we'll just give it a moment here since it's preparing. This normally takes just a couple of minutes here, so should be moving here in a moment. So once this is done here, a little bit longer than normal, there we go. It's going to try to say, like, do you want to go to the tutorial to get started? No, because we kind of know what we're doing. Great. So it's going to be receptive to our request here. So that's good. We caught that before it's an issue. Now let's go ahead and write this app.yaml file before we push it here. So we're just saying that the runtime is going to be Node.js, and the environment is going to be the flexible environment. Super simple, app.yaml. We're going to save this. Great. Yep, let's write that. The app.yaml file is created. And then from there, we're actually going to push this app to App Engine. tell it to start returning. Yep, this looks good to me. Continue, yes. All right, so what it's doing right now is it's pushing our code to App Engine, and App Engine is spinning up instances inside of your Google Cloud account to sort of serve your project, okay? Now this process here to get App Engine started from scratch for the first time takes roughly 7 to 10 minutes. That is more time than we're going to be able to wait here. But once again, while this is sort of completing here, we have our other project where we already did this, okay? So the end result here, when we're done, you're going to be given an HTTPS URL to go ahead and access your application. Well, actually, we'll have to do browse, but we'll be able to access your App Engine application. It's comprised of your project ID, .appspot.google, which is a Google-owned domain, to where we can go ahead and view this from any web terminal in the world, including mobile devices, once again, with low latency. So let's go ahead and see this, and then maybe we can peek behind the covers in GCP and see what does that look like, and then maybe inside of MongoDB to see kind of what we see here. So I think I pasted it in wrong. Oh, me missing an S. Kind of makes a difference. You don't say the right protocol. Super. Hello world. So this is a hello world that if you were in Australia or UK would have low latency. Now it's text file, so I imagine it wouldn't be that big anyway. But the point is, though, is that this is just the art of what's possible. So you can imagine you built your application on top of this, right? It's really going to allow you to unlock these really wide user bases and give you a backend and a UI that is truly sort of serverless. So if you're curious, and I think we might have the time here, we can go ahead and peek in and see sort of what does that look like instead of our cloud environment here. So let's see. That's not the one I want. This is it. So if you go to Compute Engine, we should be able to see that there are a couple more instances than the one we created, that Debian one. Two-factor authentication. All right, and this is actually for this guy. Great. So let's see. This is the right one. Great. So here's our instance one that we created. It's just sort of humming along. But interesting, there's these two weird ones sitting here inside of Central and 1B. Okay. So App Engine has automatically spun this up for us based on this server we're doing. Clearly, it's pretty low load, so it doesn't really need to do much. But the beautiful thing is, though, is that if we went ahead and we did a Twitter announcement during sort of the Super Bowl, and our application got a lot of demand all of a sudden, a huge spike, you will automatically see this sort of populating with 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever it thinks it needs, sort of serve that traffic. And then once that spike is done and sort of has subsided, that will go back down. We're not specifying what's sort of done here. And then if you open the hood underneath App Engine, there's metrics on sort of what it's doing, some of the instances here, services, spikes, things like that. This is currently loading. Yep, and there's our two guys just hanging out there. And there's other sort of metrics as you would sort of expect here. So we were going to go back inside of Atlas and say, okay, that's great. You know, what are you actually doing here? Let's see, I think this is the right one. So let's go ahead and click on one of these guys in collections, and let's look at what data we put in here from my application. Yep. So here's tests. Here's the messages we created, and here's the data here from the several times we made it. Hello world received on this date, and that date. We're going to modify, scan it. So this shows that we were actually writing data to the database. It was retrieving it, and it was returning these sort of results here. So with that said, I think that this shows that it's possible. We're going to sort of move along here. Now that we managed to sort of do the impossible, made a demo go smoothly in 25 minutes. and we made a low latency sort of hello app. So let's just take a moment, take a step back since that was successful, and talk about this, right? So in approximately 30 minutes here, we created a new GCP project from scratch. We configured that new project to accept API calls. We spun up a new sort of a VM instance from scratch, a Debian-9 instance. We waited for it to boot. We enabled a couple APIs. What else did we do? We created a MongoDB cluster. We configured the cluster. We did firewall rules. We did role-based authentication. And then we SSH in and pushed our code to our application. So those are a lot of steps we just completed, and under 30 minutes sort of live here. So I think that that is pretty impressive here. Time check. How much time do we have? That's it. OK. So we have a demo here that you guys can go ahead and if you guys want to try this. This is made in tutorial form. Feel free to take a screenshot. All the code is live here. I'm sort of getting the hook here. Give you guys a moment. So this is live right now. So you know I wasn't pulling a fast one. Feel free to stop by our booth here. Our team's here. MongoDB Atlas. $300 free credit to get started. Special shout out to Abhijit for helping for the code. Abhijit, where are you? Raise your hand. Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you, Ash, for the help. Thank you, guys. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you, Kent. Thank you very much.